terrible. Anyway, welcome. So, Kathryn, welcome to my little chats with people about randomness and hopefully a little bit about your business too. So, I wondered if you could tell me. We have met through the lovely affinity networking group, and I know through my experience that you've been incredibly kind, and there's a real soft and gentleness about you, and I feel that's a kind of mother energy which is really lovely that you give off, which is beautiful, and I think it probably is in alignment with what you do for work. So if you'd like to explain a little bit about what it is that you do, how did you get there as well, what led you to be the lost mum coach?
Oh, well, thank you for having me, first of all. And thank you for that lovely introduction. That was really, really lovely to hear. It's funny you should say that about kindness, actually. It feels like it's a hot topic for me at the moment. I posted this morning in my own group about random acts of kindness. Have you seen it? It's RAOK, which I didn't actually know that's what it stood for. To me, whenever I saw it, I thought it meant like, are you okay? I
Oh,
kept
I haven't
misinterpreting, but
seen
now
that. I have,
I know
yeah.
it's random acts of kindness. And the reason I posted about it today is because last week I lost one of my earrings on the school run, and this lovely butterfly here. And I was so gutted because I've lost it before, and I thought, well, this time it's gone. I've lost it on the way. And yesterday, someone posted in my local Facebook group that they'd found it, and someone else messaged me saying, your earring's been found. And I was just so happy that someone had gone to that effort of posting that they found it. So I just said about, small acts of kindness, they make such a difference to people. And
Yeah.
kindness is one of the core values that I have in my business, because I actually think it can be something people take for granted, right? Kindness. You just think, oh, yes, I'm kind. We just act in a kind way towards people, but it's not always a given, actually, especially when it comes towards ourselves. So on to the second point you said about, my sort of mothering type way, if you like, which I understand exactly what you're saying, that kind of supportive sort of style, because the reason I love working with what I call lost mums, by which I mean, just that sense of we've slightly lost our way, is I think we can give ourselves a hard time. That's the truth of it. And we also end up on autopilot and just doing things because they're what we know, they're what we're comfortable with. Although sometimes I'd argue that things we become comfortable, over time, they actually become uncomfortable. We just don't realize. That's the other thing. So extending kindness to ourselves is so important. And that's what I'm such a big fan of. And in answer to your question of how did I get to be the lost mum coach, I'll try and give you a quick answer to this one. So
No, please
I
don't
think
give a long one. I want a long.
okay, we'll have a long answer. We'll have a long answer. Seems like a lot of coaches, we come to it after another career route. Like, I certainly wasn't at school thinking, I know when I when I grow up I'll become a coach. I just didn't know what that kind of coaching was. I mean, to me, a coach was like football or
Yeah,
sport, a sporting coach,
yeah,
like a real like performance in
yeah.
a very specific arena, and that clearly wasn't me. So I came out of uni, like a lot of people, I think, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. We know about traditional careers like teaching and so on. And I wasn't sort of drawn immediately to any of those. And it was probably a bit of a happy situation. Like, I ended up working in HR, human resources, and I loved it. I really did. I got a Christmas temp job for, at the time it was Debenhams when they were still going. And I really enjoyed it. I was in their little HR team, doing the offer letters for the Christmas temp staff and their bonuses and all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. It was just my first taste of HR, which kind of led to a longer career in HR, which I really did enjoy for a long time. But again, a bit like what I was saying before, you fall into a bit of a pattern and a habit, and this is what I do, this is what I know, this is part of my identity. I am an HR manager. That's who I am. And I became a mum during that time as well. And I went back to work. Luckily, my employer was fantastic. I count myself very, very lucky. I had a really supportive forward-thinking employer. So I went back part-time, which sadly not every mum has that luxury of being able to do with an employer going back part-time. And I continued for quite some time, a little bit of a different mindset. I definitely feel like I had a bit of a shift when I became a mum about what really matters.
Mm.
And then it was just sometime later, I had another, I guess, lucky accident, if you like, where I stumbled across coaching. I was like, wow, what is this? This is like the missing part of my life, I think. I saw someone talking about it on Facebook. Didn't know this lady whatsoever, but it just spoke to me immediately. I was like, I have to know more about this. And she coached me, and I just thought, this is brilliant. I love this. It's all what I saw as the positive things of what I do working with people in HR, but without any of the negative stuff, if I'm honest with you. Not that we don't deal with perhaps some negative emotions and things that aren't going well for us, things that we want to change. But it's all with this idea of looking forward positively. What do we want to change? What do we want for ourselves? And I thought, I love this. And I asked myself these questions because I was being coached. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to stay where I am. I meant physically as well as in my job. We wanted to leave London. That's where we were based at the time, and move back towards the West Country. That's where my family are. My husband's family had moved as well. So it's one of those things that could always have been a maybe next year. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Maybe soon.
Mm.
But when does that ever happen? If we always say maybe next year, the people that have to make it happen are ourselves. And that's what I think sometimes we miss. Or we're waiting for some kind of permission or some kind of epiphany. And that means it just fortuitously gets the wheels in motion and happens for us. It doesn't work like that.
Mm.
So I retrained as a coach whilst I was still working in HR. I was lucky to be able to do that because I was working part-time. And it all became part of the plan to leave London, to move to the West Country, to become self-employed. It's a lot of change at once. I'm not sure I totally recommend it, but in for a penny, in for a pound. Also managed to time that with COVID. That really wasn't part of the plan
Oh
because
no.
that brought in homeschooling as well. So that was a bit of an interesting dynamic for a while. But ironically, the fact that I wasn't employed was actually a big help at the time because my daughter was off school and my husband was still trying to work from home. And it was like most people, it was a bit chaotic, wasn't it? We weren't, it was like the rug pulled out moment, wasn't it? But it did stall our moving plans. And the irony was, of course, when everyone started working from home during COVID, reassessing things, I think a lot of people wanted to move to the West Country. So it suddenly became really competitive down here to find somewhere to live. And we were trying to look for properties and we wouldn't even get to a viewing. They'd say, oh, it's sold before you even,
Wow, really? Oh
manage.
my God.
Oh no, yeah, yeah. So it felt quite
What year were you
brutal
doing
in
it?
a way.
2020 or 20?
This is 2020. Yeah,
Wow.
this is 2020. This is in the summer when things had just sort of opened back up. We did go back into another lockdown, but luckily for us, we did manage to find a house in the July of 2020 and move in the October. So all things considered, that was quite a quick turnaround. Believe me, it didn't feel like it at the time. It really didn't. But and it was hard because searches were being delayed and all sorts. But we kind of I had to do an in-school transfer for my daughter. It was quite stressful, but I'm now incredibly grateful for what we have. I do think we were destined to be in this house.
Mm.
If it hadn't been for the COVID interruption, we actually would have moved to another home. And I would have been in a city as opposed to a town by the seaside, which is where I am now. Because again, COVID was a time to sort of reevaluate. And I thought, well, maybe I don't need to be near a city centre. Maybe that's not part of the equation that we need anymore. So
Mm. And your
yeah.
husband, did he have to move jobs as well then?
Well, this is the irony actually. So what had happened is I did my retraining in 2019 and we started to think, like, this is the plan. We're going to move in 2020. So bear in mind, this is all before
Before you
COVID.
knew COVID.
And my husband had managed to negotiate with his employer flexible working. Now,
Ah,
this is obviously, I know, which was incredible.
pre-COVID.
So we
That's
thought,
amazing.
Yes, yeah. So he was still going to have to travel up to London, sort of part time, but it wasn't going to be the whole time because that would have been a move without a move really happening. So that wasn't really what we wanted. So that was amazing that he'd managed to sort of negotiate that. And then, of course, COVID changed everything. And when we actually moved, when we moved in that October, we shortly went into another lockdown. So he was working remotely again anyway. It became much more normal, didn't it?
Mm,
As it happens, he's changed employer, but he's managed to get a similar. I think the whole concept of sort of hybrid working is so much more common now, isn't it? That
yeah.
people work partly from home, partly in the office.
Mm,
So again, ironically, I could say maybe COVID has done us two favors in that respect: the ability to work more flexibly for him, but also the fact that we ended up in this home, which it's funny. I'm not a big sort of fate and destiny kind of person, but I just think this feels like it was meant to be this house.
mm. Lovely. Sounds wonderful. So tell me, how is business been going? Is because it's never easy when people start, but to then start within COVID, it must have taken some time to sort of gain some momentum. Or did it make it easier because it was COVID for you to get up and running?
Yeah, I have no other reference point, to be honest with you. I'm not sure it would have necessarily been easier at any other time.
Yeah.
I would say it was yeah, definitely a bit of a curveball. So I'd probably say a bit more of a false start because we were trying to move and trying to homeschool, and I'd sort of just started my business. So to be honest, the business took a bit of a back step. So
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I'm self-employed. But of course, when you're self-employed, you make the rules, don't you? So it's kind of like I have to do this today, so that gets parked. Now, I think that's a blessing and a curse, if I'm honest with you. A lot of us we're self-employed because we really want that flexibility, don't we? But also it means we end up absorbing so much other stuff left, right, and centre. And it's very easy to put what we want on the back burner, which ironically is what I spend a lot of time talking to people about, like not putting themselves on the back burner. However, those were quite exceptional circumstances. But yeah, but after we moved, so yes, but that was if in all honesty, that was such a big part of our life plan. I don't see that as a sacrifice. I see that as, this is all part of our ongoing new life now down
Mm.
here. I can't, I don't think we would ever want to move back. I mean, certainly because we have family this way as well, it makes no sense to move back. Um, yeah, so I'd say that was a sort of an unusual period. But it was, everything was a bit new and uncharted territory, so I kind of just threw it all into a big pot of, moving, new school, new location, new career, new everything. Why not? Let's do it all at once.
So do you find most of your clients are online? Is all your business now online, really?
Yes, it is mostly. I have to say, I genuinely love face-to-face coaching, if that's possible. And I certainly did quite a lot more of that before I moved. Obviously, being in London, it was a bit easier to do that.
Mm.
Obviously, there are people everywhere that would benefit from face-to-face, but it just seemed like and then certainly like pre-COVID, it was more the norm, wasn't it? You would
Yeah.
meet someone for something
Yeah.
rather than I have to be, I'm not sure I even used Zoom before.
No, I don't think I'd even heard of it before COVID.
Exactly. And now it's just become part of our lives, hasn't it? I
Mm,
mean, I'll be honest, I still think online is absolutely fine. I do love to be able to see the person that I'm talking to and working with, because you can still kind of read facial expressions and see if someone is thinking or pausing or whatever it might be. Whereas and obviously you get the real benefit of that face to face. It just, I think, adds a slight extra dimension, to be
yeah.
honest. But for me, I guess Zoom is the sort of next best option, and works really quite well. I certainly can't grumble. It's been great for me to be able to work literally from my kitchen, which is where I am now, because I choose the sunniest room in the house so I don't get so cold.
Yeah.
And because I spend so much time sat at I say desk, it's the kitchen table. um yeah, it's so lovely that other people can also be in the comfort of their own home. And when you're doing something like coaching with somebody, it's such a personal and private thing, that someone's sharing with you.
Mm.
it's actually quite nice on two grounds. One is that they're in the comfort of their own environment. It's all familiar. They don't have to worry about the setting and, strangers or anything like that. But also the only stranger, if you like, is me. But in some ways, that's actually what's good about coaching. I don't have this vested interest in what decision you want to make, what it is you want to work on. I don't have to, my opinion doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about pleasing me or what judgment I might have, because none of that is relevant. This is all about you and what it is that you want, without any extra baggage or expectation or any of those things. So yes, I guess online does work quite well if you can get both those things at play and someone feels comfortable enough to share with you. I think that's what's so important. But luckily, I think this is the irony. You think it might be more uncomfortable opening up to a stranger than it is to someone close to you. But conversely, it seems like the opposite, because you don't have to worry about all those extra things.
No, absolutely. I was just thinking, it's exactly that because you convey this wonderful warmth about you, that I think it would be very easy to not feel. Often we can get into little triggers of something, or I don't know, particularly with coaching. Myself, I'm thinking about times when I've thought, oh God, they're trying to extract something from me and I don't know how to answer this question, or I'm not doing it, I'm not good enough, or whatever. I feel like you would, I don't know, you feel, it feels safe doing that with you, not to feel judged in that way. I feel like I wouldn't feel judged to be stupid or not getting because often with coaching, the answer is, I mean, everything is within us, isn't it? And you're trying to help us to come to that understanding. But there are points where we do come to a bit of a full stop, don't we? And we're kind of like, I don't know which way's forward, and so it kind of, a good coach, I suppose, is to help people to feel secure in that. Actually, I don't know where I'm going now. I don't know what how can I move? Is there a way to move forward? Can you try and help me in that way? And so I think that's really important to feel safe and confident and secure, and that you're not going to be judged as in a coaching session.
It's one of the cornerstones of any coaching. You have to feel that kind of psychological safety of what you're going to share, and that there is that no judgment. And it is true, because none of us are perfect. Absolutely not. I make no bones about it. I'm still very much a work in progress. I don't have it all nailed. I have good days and bad days, just like anyone else. What I call it noodle soup brain, which I think people can resonate with. I talk about all sorts of weird analogies,
I call
but
it
people get
menopause
what I'm
brain
talking about.
personally.
But it's just like we have in our head like a big swirl of noodles. They can get all tangled up, right? And that's when you get that, I don't know where to start. I don't even know what I think. And someone can come to coaching and go, I don't know what I think and I don't know what to do. But then it comes out and it's like unraveling the noodles. And they'll be talking. And then often at the end, they go, sorry, I was rambling. And I'm like, no need to apologize. You might think you were rambling, but what you were doing was processing. Instead of it all being in here, out it was coming. What we need to do now is just find which is the right noodle to kind of unravel and see, is this the one that really matters, or is it this one? And I'll try and coax out some questions or reflections and say things like, you said a couple of times this particular word, and they may not even realize something a very strong word like hate even, or they'll light up when they're talking about one thing, or seem really despondent, and to them they're just unloading. But to me it's like I can just kind of say, okay, yeah, take it all in, and then let's work out what we're going to do with it. I call my first session of coaching, I call it unpacking, because I think people come and they think, I need to tell you everything. I'm like, don't worry, absolutely, let's get as much of it out as we can, literally unpack the suitcase. But we're not going to perhaps answer absolutely everything all at once. We'll start to unpick each part. And inevitably, when we pick one piece up, we'll realize there's much more to it than we thought. This is the piece that really matters. This piece, perhaps not so much. We've given it some weight. perhaps because of what other people think, or because we're worried about being judged. And we can deal with all these different pieces when we've unpacked them.
Yeah, sounds great. Is there any part of you now? This isn't. I think I know the answer to this question.
Okay.
That misses any part of your previous life.
Well, there was a little bit actually. There are no regrets. I will definitely say that. I'll 100% say it's a learning curve. I don't think you just naturally become an entrepreneur and nail every part of being a business owner when you go self-employed. There was so much to it that I just not a clue. Doing tax return and all this kind of stuff was like, holy smokes, I've got to do all these things. You are literally the
Your
whole machine
everything.
instead of the
Yeah.
cog in the machine. I do miss my lovely colleagues. I had some of the best colleagues ever. And you get that, it's that sort of face-to-face interaction, that moment of downtime where you can make a coffee and have a grumble or whatever it might be. I miss that part. I did love being part of the organization I worked for. I really felt like I did contribute and had some fantastic colleagues, as I said, and I believed in what we were doing. But otherwise, I don't miss some of the other things. Certainly don't miss commuting, that's for sure. Being in someone's armpit on the tube, don't miss that for a moment. But there are moments when you're self-employed, it can be lonely sometimes. I call it a danger day. I don't know if you ever feel the same. When you look at your diary and you actually don't have some meetings in that day, or perhaps there isn't a networking you're going to or something, or it's just a chunk of time. I call it a danger time because if I'm left to my own devices, I could get a bit like despondent and feel like, well, I won't, I can't bother to do anything.
Yeah.
You have to be your own motivator and you have to be really disciplined. There's no one like your employer
Yeah.
saying, where is this thing? And we've got a
There's
meeting
no one
and all
doing
this
your
kind of
appraisal for you.
stuff. Which again, a blessing and a curse. But you have to have all of that for yourself. And it can be hard. It's why I think it's so important to have your colleague equivalents, is what I call it. When I go to networking, I just know that other small business owners, they get it. When you can say, I'm having a crap day.
Yes.
I hear you, and like this happened, or I've had to chase somebody for payment, and it was a bit awkward, and this, that, and the other, and they get it because we're in that sort of similar situation. Whereas it's quite funny, and I'll put my hands up and say I was absolutely this person. I had no idea. So if someone in my former life says to me, "Oh, how's business?" I just sort of say, "Oh, it's fine," because I could launch into a whole load of stuff, but it just doesn't mean anything. And I just think that's I won't take over your life and tell you everything that's going on. I like to share that with my equivalent colleagues these days.
Yeah. People who understand a bit better of the highs and lows of being self-employed. But right now you can walk outside the door and go down to the beach or go to the shops and just decide, actually I can't be bothered to do anything else today. I'll just pack up and you're done. So there's that advantage, isn't there, of being flexible to just go for a walk, which in a
Oh,
normal
absolutely. And I
office
think
environment you
if
can't
I'm
do.
if I'm ever trying to force the issue, if I'm sat here thinking I will write this blog today and I will write this, I'll sit here and I call it blank page syndrome. It's like, why hasn't it written itself already? So my genius like materialized on the page already, and it's complete and ready to go, and that just doesn't work for me. I can't force the issue. Whereas, I mean, there is actually something in this. It really often good ideas and your creativity flows when you're either in the shower, something actually to do with the water, but that's really annoying because you can't write anything
You can't
down.
write it
You try
down,
and
yeah.
write it in the steam, but it's going to be gone. Or when you're out walking, and that's good because I've always got my phone with me, partly because I love to track my steps. That's become a new favorite thing for me. I love to make sure I hit my step count, try and look after myself. But also I can jot down if I just think of a great or this would be a great title for a blog. I can literally just jot it down in the notes section and then keep
Yeah.
going. And I also listen to like a podcast or something as I'm walking. So in my head, you see, I'm still doing business stuff as well as doing the well-being stuff. So it's,
Exactly.
that's got to be a double
Double
win,
win.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So the reason why I get people to come and chat to me, and I love to hear about everybody's businesses, is because when I was younger, I discovered my father was dying of cancer, and I became very unwell because I didn't sit and listen to my emotions, which very few of us do, to be honest, because why would you do that? We've got to get on and do things, and life's busy. But actually sitting and listening to emotions and feelings are really important in order to release them, to not have to have them sitting with us for so long. And in my field of work, I help people to release emotions. I help people to just to be comfortable with allowing for stuff to come up whenever it arises, and just to be comfortable with that. And it doesn't have to be about a big story or a big drama or to connect in with what's happened in the past. It's just about where are we right here, right now. So the question I always ask people on this podcast, and the reason on this recording, and the reason I always ask is because of what I've been through. I want to try and prevent others from feeling the same way that I did. But the question I ask is the question that you get asked every day, probably, and we always tend to answer in a very standard way. And so I'm just giving you the opportunity in this moment now to answer this question in a more reflective way, in a way that you're happy to share as well, but not to give the standard response to this question. And so the question is, how are you? How are you feeling in this moment?
Yeah. And I guess what we think of as that stock response is, I'm fine, or good. That's it. Good. To me, that's a kind of, let's just move on. It's almost like my leg hasn't fallen off. Let's carry on the conversation. It's almost like that, isn't it? Because sometimes if we answer that really honestly, it's not that icebreaker. You fine, move on to whatever's in the way. It's like, oh, actually, there's a conversation to be had here, and I think we get so used to having those niceties before we go into the stuff. The beauty of it is, obviously, as a coach, always starting with the how are you. It's the start of what we're going to be talking about. So I'm very used to really asking people how they are, and I'll notice if they go, oh, yeah, and if they say to me fine, I'm like, is that with an edge? Is that fine? Is that, let's expand on that a little bit. So, well, yeah, but thank you for asking. I am quite self-reflective. I do notice sometimes when I'm in a grump. I know sometimes when I've thought myself into a grump, and I also know that I am more than capable of acknowledging that, exactly like what you said, releasing that, understanding that it's there, but it doesn't have to stay. I can release that and move on. I don't have to let it dominate my day. So I think there's a great phrase, isn't it? Something like, it's not your day that affects your mood, it's your mood that affects your day. I think that's how it goes, like the way, and I know sometimes if I'm in a bit of a strop, I just need to take myself off, go and have that walk or something, like I've said, and just kind of let it all sort of dissipate and then come back with a new sort of frame of mind. I think what I have realized is that, certainly my experience, it's been 3 and a bit years now, my experience of self-employment is quite up and down. I haven't found this sort of holy grail of consistent. People talk about consistency a lot, don't they? Like, you want to reach consistent months and financially and client flow and all that kind of stuff, which I absolutely would love to, and I can see the benefit of that. My own experience of it is I do seem to have peaks and troughs.
Mine
So
too,
what
after
I've tried,
15 years as well. So just point that
yeah,
one out.
yeah, yeah, and I'm trying to think, well, maybe this is okay, or maybe this is normal, or who's to say that this is, I'm trying to reflect on that. If I'm constantly striving for this consistency, yes, I'd like a bit more of it. So basically, instead of it being quite so like this, it would be nice if it was a bit smoother. But the fact that it is going to undulate, I think I'm trying to get to some kind of acceptance around that, rather than getting myself in a stress or a tizzy or feeling overwhelmed, because I recognize, like I said, I'm not this amazing polished article. I'm not immune to stuff that I talk to my clients about. You know, I can sometimes doubt myself and question, oh, this person was interested and then they didn't get back to me. Is that because I didn't explain myself properly? Is that because I blah 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 blah? Often, as we now know, and you know, when we have that clearer thinking space, we know it's not about us. It could be whatever else is going on for them. So yeah, I guess I'm recognizing that I'm in this sort of cycle. And for me, what I am trying to get better at is sort of managing sort of my emotions following quite the same peaks and troughs, trying to keep them a little bit more on an even keel throughout that. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I think I'm a more aware of it now, having done this for quite some time, and recognizing that we do respond to what's going on around us because we're human. But equally, you know, as a business owner, I am responsible for my business. So if I just go, right, that's it, screw it, and stomp off and refuse to do anything, I can't, you know, I can't expect things to necessarily change. So I am trying to do a few more things. I talk to people about comfort zones quite a lot. I'm a big fan of playing to our strengths and not making yourself do something for the sake of it, you know. I'm also like, well, what also might help? And I have to look at myself and my business when I'm talking about this too. Like, what might help me grow my business? Will I perhaps do some more? I put an objective down to do some more guesting, if you like. I want to be talking to people about what I do, because as I've said to someone recently, people don't find you by osmosis. There isn't some kind of magic where people go, oh, I know, and they find you. We feel like we're saying a lot and doing a lot, don't we? But often it's just the tip of the iceberg that people see. You think you've done all this stuff underneath, and you have. It's just that's not what's visible to people.
Mm.
So I have to remind myself of these things, and yeah, keep the faith in what I'm doing. But yeah, I am on the whole, I would say I am good, but not in a passing, fleeting, empty good way. I do feel on the whole pretty good.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for answering it so deeply and honestly. And yeah, because sometimes it is difficult for us to admit that actually it's not always plain sailing with our businesses. And there seems to be, you know, there's very much, certainly if you look at Facebook as well, you'll see the happier lives of people rather than the downside of people and what's going on in their businesses, and you're not always knowing that actually we're all going up and down. And I, you know, as I said, I've been doing this for 15 years now. uh, I don't have steady flow yet, and it's still a constant aspiration to find more balance. And definitely for me, next year I'm changing the way I work in order to find more balance, because like you, it has been, you know, very steep up and downs. And when you're in a cost of living crisis, it's not so easy, is it, to
Mm.
cope with those highs and lows. So I've had to really look at different ways in order to get people to sign into to having a contract, so that then, even though they might not come every month, they pay every month, and then they have a more balanced experience of their outgoings as well, because they can come only 4 times a year, but if they pay every month, then it's going to be a small amount coming out every month rather than a peaked amount at certain
Yeah.
key points. So yeah, and I think it's taken me 15 years to get to that point of understanding, well, actually a lot of people do want that. They do want that accountability in a way, to show up, to come, to say, right, I'm paying for something because I want to do it. Because, you know, who doesn't want to come for a massage? You know, I mean, it's not something that you're going, oh no, I definitely don't want to do that. So it is about finding ways, isn't it, to that you can acknowledge actually people do want to come and see me. They do. My work is valid and important for them,
Yeah.
and so, and not to undermine ourselves in that process, which can be so easy when it's your personal work, can it? You can say, well, they're obviously not coming because they obviously don't like me, or they don't like my work, or whatever. And it is hard to confront that and say, and tell other people out loud, well, you know what, it's not always easy. Sometimes it's a bit of a roller coaster. But I think actually, we're very lucky, aren't we, in that we are in this wonderful network of women that we do talk about that, we do share that information, and we do discuss how it is always it's always up and down, and it's not, there isn't anybody who seems to be completely like, okay, I know I've got this every month. It's just it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really valuable to, the more people that talk about this, the more people can understand that it's okay to say, actually, our life isn't always perfect. And
Yeah.
life isn't, is it? It never is. So,
No, absolutely. And I so appreciate that. And, the reason I'm working with clients is because life isn't perfect. If life was perfect, I'd be out of business because, everyone would be sailing along and it would all be rosy. But that's
exactly.
not how it rolls. So, and I love the fact that in our sort of business networking, we will talk about the warts and all. And I think it's so important to you, because if all you ever see is sort of this image of perfection and, the six-figure this and, all those kind of stories, which they can be so deflect. I saw a lot of that when I started out, and when you
Yes,
first
particularly in
start out,
coaching, isn't it? Yeah.
what the hell am I? I'm clearly going horribly wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
start. It's quite a crippling thing to see these phenomenal. Like I, in my first 6 months, yada yada. I'm like, but it's kind of, instead of feeling like, wow, that's amazing, you think, really, is that? And I think a lot of that is quite inflated. I know an awful lot of coaches now, and I love there are people that I can keep it very real with, and we do share our wins together, which I love. But we will also talk about the sort of warts and all the work that goes in behind the scenes. And I love this like sort of anti-perfectionism movement, or that like we'll talk about things that have just gone horribly wrong. Because let's be honest, they do go wrong sometimes. Things like people might say, I had this failed launch and it was really upsetting. However, I took this idea and I ran with it and I did this, and we realize it's not the end of the story. That's what's lovely about it. It's not like, well, therefore I'm
We
a
just keep
disaster
going.
and yeah, and I'll give up. It's like, no, I need to do something different. And it can be very hard, particularly in the early days, to not get derailed by that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do love this idea of talking more openly about failure. I talk about failure a lot, actually. And I'm giving a talk next month about it, December. I'm really excited about it. It's grown and grown and grown. I was going to be talking about failure and confidence, but I've had to narrow it down to just failure because I've got a lot to say about failure. Yeah, because well, I'm calling it normalizing failure, because
Brilliant.
I think we have to be a lot more accepting of it and not hide it when it does happen, because I think it's so damaging if you are surrounded by people who just present this idea of success and nothing goes wrong. It feels you're less likely to own up to any mistakes you make, for
Exactly.
starters, or
Yeah.
feel that you can't even make them in the first place. And that's really damaging, because we are people. We will make mistakes. It really matters, and it develops your resilience as well. And it's not just for the sake of it. We need resilience for when stuff goes wrong that's totally out of our control. And if you're in this world where everything's so perfect, your ability to cope with stuff going wrong is not very good. So
No.
we need that kind of ability to tackle the stuff that doesn't go according to plan.
And people only ever become successful after failing. You can't just miraculously become successful overnight. It just doesn't work that way for
Yeah,
anybody. Even the most successful people have failed and failed and failed again, and the reason they're successful is because they keep trying and they don't
yeah.
stop. And that's
And
how
that's the
they
thing
get
you
things
remember.
done.
That's the bit you remember, the success part, don't you? And
Yeah.
I don't want to give away everything I want to talk about, but I use some famous examples because we see them as successful people, rightly so. They had amazing success, but like you said, it's not like they just were miraculously amazing. And so I talk about sports people. Actually, it's ironic, we're going full circle talking about coaching and back to sports
Yeah.
coaching and stuff. But because sports people, it's such a lovely example. Their success and failure is a very obvious thing. They win the race, or they don't,
Yeah.
or
And it's
win
quite
the
immediate
medal.
as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's immediate, it's obvious, and it's also in the spotlight. Crikey! I mean, I think there's a whole host of things for them to contend with. but yeah, often the stories of the hard work, the graft, and the failing on the way to that success, we don't remember
Mm.
any of that stuff because it's the success that's pointed out. So I talk about people like Simone Biles or Michael Jordan or even Stephen King, the author. Here's a little snippet for you. I don't know if you've heard this about him, and I'd like to think this is a true thing that I found on the internet, because obviously the internet tells the truth. But it took him, I think, 30 attempts to get Carrie published.
Wow.
30, yeah, exactly. Can you imagine thinking after go number 29,
Mm.
I'll give it one more go. Can you imagine?
Mm.
But none of us will know or remember that, will we? We'll
No.
think of. I mean, look what followed. Crikey.
And look at Richard Branson. He's failed and failed. Do you remember he was doing all those balloon attempts, trying to get everywhere, and he succeeded in the end. He wanted to go into space, and he managed to do it. And he spent years and years and years trying to get there. Lots of failed attempts before he got to where he got to, but he did succeed in the end because he carried on and he determined to win, wasn't he? So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean it's the same for whatever is Elon Musk. He's doing the same thing as well. My partner's constantly watching his launches and seeing them come up and go straight back down
yeah,
again or blowing up or whatever, the amount of money that they just gets blown into the sky. But they are determined to keep trying, aren't they? And that's how success works, isn't it?
yeah. Absolutely. Determination to keep going is so important. But yeah, it can be hard when if we're not willing to talk about the stuff that doesn't go according to plan on the way. And I think that's what I love about coaching. It's not about saying, oh, my life hasn't gone according to plan. It's like what trajectory are you on at the moment? And is that the one that you want to be staying on? Because
Mm.
whatever has been, we can't do anything about that. But it doesn't mean it has to be what's to come. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to stay. And for me, it was a real kind of light bulb moment when I realized, well, I choose when I'm going to change this trajectory. I don't have to wait for this permission or anything else. I have to give it to myself, and I will make it happen. I'm not saying that we make easy choices. We know there's going to be trade-off and compromise and all those things, but are we doing what it is that we really want to do? So coaching undoubtedly helped me make that change. It was sort of like it was like looming, but it was just staying here.
Mm.
While I was just still going here. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I want this to happen. So what are we going to do to make this happen? And the realization that you can change that path. It's like take it a couple of degrees and you'll end up at a much different destination, won't you? But as long as it's the one that you want to be heading towards, that's what really matters.
I think it's so important for people to see that. I think, but particularly from, when I was younger, it was very much the norm that people would have stayed in their career, even in the same company, for all their life, and that just doesn't happen anymore at all.
Mm.
So it is so important for people to know that we are masters of our, we are able to, control our lives and to change in ways, and to know then not only that our own change, but if change happens around us, it's not so worrying and frightening, isn't it? It's just being able to adjust to all kinds of change. So if we are willing to change, and don't you find once you start on that trajectory, you kind of like, it sort of starts the ball rolling, and it gets you kind of become like really addicted to change, addicted to not necessarily change, but to achieving and to doing and to creating your life. And
Yeah,
you kind of, once you start to gain the confidence. I was like, okay, I can make that change, I can make that and that, oh, this is how it happens. It
yeah,
sort of allows you to then say, you build that internal confidence, don't you, to say, okay, right now I can go on and do more, and I can achieve more, and I can do better. And it's, I think that's just the building blocks for life, isn't it? To be able to feel feel like you're achieving and doing, and you have a purpose. It is
Yeah, I
so
think
important.
you've hit on the exact key word, which is, and it's that purpose. Because if you're just doing it because it's what you're used to, it's what you know, it's like going through the motions. I call it stealth mare, because you're just doing what you know, but you don't love it anymore. But the sneaky thing about it is you perhaps don't realize you don't perhaps love it anymore. It's just what is. And because nothing is perhaps horribly wrong, you don't think you've got anything to complain about. So you keep going. I think that's quite dangerous territory. So that's why I call it stealth mare. It sneaks up. It's such a gradual accumulation. There's not an obvious moment where you think, oh my God, this is totally the wrong thing for me. It's just gradual. But when if you have made a change and you realize, oh, this is what it's like now to feel like this is what I care about, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what my purpose is, you have this like renewed energy to put your all into it. Possibly partly because you stepped away from that thing before. Was it? I was talking to somebody about this just yesterday, about stepping away from something stable into something new and scary. And I thought, well, I can totally empathize, because in many ways I did that. I had that stable career in HR. I could still be in it. It's known. If I said I was an HR manager, most people have a grasp of what that is. When I tell people I'm a life coach, sometimes I can see a great big question mark hanging over their heads. So like, what the hell is that?
Mm.
And I get that, because that was also me too before I knew about it. The sad thing is, I think life coaching is something to experience, not to explain.
Yes.
And I think unless people perhaps try it, it'll always remain something of a question mark. I can do my best to try to explain, but for me, it's like, it's a bit like if you try to explain a massage to somebody. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
It's not the same as them actually having the experience and knowing how they might feel, and like you physically feel. But for us as coaches too, you can feel, sometimes people say, oh, a weight has been lifted,
Yeah.
because it's a bit like I said, that noodle soup, it can weigh you down.
Yeah.
It gets
Yeah.
a bit of a bog up there, and you just need to feel that release and feeling lighter. But it's something to experience, I think, rather than unfortunately just have someone explain it to you.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you would like to share today? You were mentioning something about a group. Is that a Facebook group that people can add a link to? Is that?
Yes, I do. I do have my own little Facebook group. It is the Lost Mum Community. It's a lovely little small group. So yes, people are very welcome to join us in there. I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot. Mostly that's where I generally am on social media. So it's well, you'll see, because it's got the Lost Mum Coach. It's Kathryn Eball. Maybe I think I might have had to put the E in, because perhaps someone else had the other one. But anyway, so yeah, I'm they're my two places that people can mostly find me, or they're very welcome to have a look on my website and get in touch. I actually love it when people do get in touch. They can ask me anything. I really don't mind that. I think sometimes people feel a bit reticent to ask a question. They think it's a silly question about coaching, or they want to know something. But I welcome it. I love it if people want to know more. I'm very happy for people to contact me and have a chat.
Brilliant. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share today?
Gosh, not that immediately comes to mind. I'm sure many will after we stop. That's always the way. But I feel like we have spoken quite a lot, and I probably have rambled on enough. So I think
Not at all. It's been really interesting and lovely to chat to you today. So thank you very